Hi, this is Jason Nickleby, Coordinator of Officiating Services with the Minnesota State High School League, and this is football officiating training tape number 6. A couple things to keep in mind this week that we will talk about from a mechanics and rules standpoint and just crew communication, how we pull those things together. So we're doing a nice job. Review some of the things in the memo as well. I know those are a little bit longer and folks don't want to read those necessarily, but they do have some things that our observers and others have seen out there this season, including some pieces on inadvertent whistles and helmets coming off of players during a down. So review that language if you would with your crew and just review the mechanics of that. Remember, when we're looking at these plays, not picking on any one team or player or crew or official, just trying to learn from these and incorporate these aspects into our pre-games and our repertoires during games. So good luck this week. And with that, let's look at some plays. All right, on this one, we have 3rd and long. Quarterback rolls out to the right, and the pass ultimately gets intercepted, and we have a return here. So I want to talk about just our mechanics and coverage on this. So reminder, referees, you're going to be in your position right off the tight end, about 14 yards deep or so. And when the quarterback rolls out like this, we're just going to turn and pivot and officiate inside out, which is exactly what this referee does in this particular situation. So this is really well done by the referee. Watch how he just turns and pivots and officiates the quarterback from his position. And that's exactly what we want the umpires to do as well if it goes to their side. Now, we're moving downfield as the pass is imminent as line of scrimmage officials, and that's great. And then as soon as we see it's intercepted, we're just going to stop, be stationary, and then pick up blocks. Because again, with 5 officials, we don't have the luxury to look all over the place. We have to pick up blocks at the point of attack. And this is especially critical on change of possession plays, kick plays, interceptions, and so forth, because this is where blindside blocks, legal block below the waist, and so forth take place, block in the back, out in space, and we just need to pick up those players going upstream, going against the grain, look for those kinds of safety type fouls. And then I like how we let the play develop in front of us as the line of scrimmage official and let it go past us, officiate it from behind, just like we would a running play to our side of the field. So we do a nice job with that. But umpires, I noticed at the end of this play, we're out on the sideline. We would like you to just stay in the middle of the field, officiate inside out, pick up blocks at the point of attack, and then remember that we're the primary for goal line responsibility. Referees, we want you to pick up the passer. Doesn't mean that you're not officiating anybody else, but we'd like you to have a real good awareness of the passer, mainly because they tend to be a high value target, if you will, during these interception returns. So want to make sure that we pick them up and make sure that they don't get blocked illegally. But again, it doesn't mean we're just focusing on them. We need to pick up other blocks in our periphery as well. So umpires, stay in your spot right off the tight end spot and just officiate inside out, and then have primary for goal line responsibility along with the line of scrimmage officials. So do a pretty good job on this play. Referee, really nicely done, just turning and officiating inside out. Pick up those blocks, pick up players going upstream against the grain. Those are the ones that are more or have a higher tendency to foul. So we want to get our vision to those blocks and make sure that we pick up blindside blocks, illegal block below the waist, any safety fouls. Want to make sure that we're on top of those. And then if there happens to be any fouls, let's just take our time and go through all the steps. But overall, pretty good coverage on this play. On this play, it's the almost the last play of the game. And sometimes when this happens, we can lose our concentration. But you see here that we have 12 players on offense, and the referee picks it up and throws the flag and calls illegal substitution against the offense. So this is well done by the referee to be on top of our mechanics and our focus, even at the end of the game like this. Mechanically, umpires, we need to be down on this too. We don't need to signal that we have 11 players on offense at exactly the same time as the referee, but we should be counting within a similar time frame and should have a flag for illegal substitution in this case as well. So that's mechanically, we need umpire, referee counting the offense every down, back judges counting the defense every down, and then line of scrimmage, we really should be counting the players from our sideline as well to assist and make sure that we're on top of these kinds of things. But I wanted to also bring the attention to the rules aspect of substitutions, and there's some differences between levels of play, some misconceptions, and you want to take a look at Rule 3.7 for substitutions, and that's on page 46, and it basically says that when we have substitutes that are coming in, the player that's being replaced needs to begin to leave the field within 3 seconds. Now, it doesn't need to be 3.1 seconds. Let's use common sense. If they're making an effort to get off the field, let's give them that chance to get out of there. A couple things that there's misconceptions on. In high school football, there is no matchup provision at this point, meaning if the offense substitutes, the defense doesn't have an opportunity to match up. They need to substitute within that same time frame and make sure they have 11 on the field when the ball is snapped, unlike other levels where they're afforded the opportunity to match up. The second aspect is the only thing the rule says is they need to leave within 3 seconds, and it doesn't say anything about breaking the huddle with 12 or more. So we hear that quite a bit on high school fields, and sometimes it's called as illegal substitution. And we need to be careful about the rules aspect, that the only requirement they have is that if they are an outgoing player, they just need to begin to leave within 3 seconds of that substitute communicating with them. So even if they break the huddle, as long as they are making their way towards the sideline in that 3 second time frame, it's going to be just fine. So another thing, Article 2, a player, replaced player, or substitute is required to leave the field at the side on which his team box is located and go directly to the team box. So we can't go out across the end line. We can't go on the other team's sideline. If we do that, it would constitute an illegal substitution. The other pieces is they're supposed to come into the 9-yard marks. Let's not be nitpicky about that. Assuming the defense sees them and has an opportunity to, set up their defense and cover them, then as long as they get close enough to that, then we're going to be okay with that. It's going to be illegal participation if they don't make it to the 9-yard marks and it's clearly a hideout type play, putting them out there so that the defense doesn't have a chance to see them. So keep in mind, offensive substitutes, they have to come into the 9-yard marks or close enough, or at least to a point on the field where the defense has an opportunity to see them. If not, then we need to hold them to the letter of the rule of the 9-yard mark, and if they participate in a hideout type play, it would be illegal participation. So just something to consider with substitutes. Again, no such thing as breaking the huddle with 12. Again, no matchup provision in high school football. As long as they're leaving within 3 seconds, they're good. And then mechanically, referees and umpires, we need to be down on legal substitutions on offense on every time, and then back judges for sure on defense. And then it would be helpful if we also had assistance from the line of scrimmage officials. All right, on this one we have a player encroach from the defense, and then we also have a receiver false start on the left side with the encroachment at the bottom side of the screen. So I just wanted to talk about the rules aspect a little bit, and then mainly our mechanics and how we address a play like this one. So if you look at the replay here, you'll see that we have a player right around the hash there, right on the right guard, right tackle, that will move towards the neutral zone, and then we also have a false start at approximately or pretty close at the same time. So these are really challenging, and so what I would say is if we have a flag from multiple officials on a false start encroachment type play, mechanically we can't be doing preliminary signals, because if one person has a false start and another person has encroachment, then we're going to be in a little bit of a pickle there. We need to make our way to the middle of the field and have a discussion about what we saw and what occurred first, and then provide that information to the referee, who can make the announcement. I think we go a little too fast on this one. Referees right into the announcement of the false start. I'm not saying that that's not accurate, but if you slow this down in slow motion, it's pretty tight on whether the encroachment or the false start action occurs first. And so we definitely need to have a discussion. So line of scrimmage officials, you need to come in, have a discussion, or whichever officials throw it. If it's the umpire in line of scrimmage or referee in line of scrimmage, we need to have a discussion about what we saw, what occurred first, and then move forward from there. But no preliminary signals. Make sure we don't do preliminary signals when we have multiple flags. And that goes not just for encroachment and false start, but anytime we have multiple flags on the ground, we don't want to do any kind of preliminary signals until we have all of the information. But from a rules perspective, just a reminder that we don't have a rule where if a player comes into the neutral zone and causes a false start, that it's going to be, on the defense or those kind of things. Whatever happens first is the one in high school football is the one that's going to be the foul. If that defensive player breaks the plane in the neutral zone, okay, it's going to be encroachment on them. If the offense goes first, it's going to be a false start on them. Don't nitpick on encroachment, as far as lining up in the neutral zone is concerned. Make them legal if you can. Work with the coaches, warn as necessary. Same thing with false starts. If they barely, tweak their knee or barely bend their knee or barely lean forward, that's not what we're looking for false starts. We're looking from a false start perspective. We're looking for when they simulate the start of the play, and if we're just barely bending our knee or barely leaning forward, or an inch of our helmet is in the neutral zone for encroachment, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for quality fouls, ones where they have a clear advantage or deception of the opposing team. So that's what we're looking for. That's what we have in this particular situation. The only thing I would say about this mechanically, let's slow this down. Line of scrimmage officials come in, have a discussion, and then report to the referee, who can then make one announcement. Okay, on this one, I just want to talk end of half, end of game mechanics, and then just a rules piece. So we have a first down inbounds. So the clock is going to run on the ready for play. Referees, let's be really deliberate on this. We don't need to wind the clock until everybody's in position to officiate and we're all set. And this would be a case where we would ask for you to have a whistle followed by a wind, where typically on a first down in the middle of the field, middle of the first quarter, we don't need a whistle, just wind the game clock. Don't need a whistle in that case. But I would say in this particular situation, whistle, wind, and then we would have the clock start at that point. So Umpires, no need to wait here. Remember, we don't have substitution provisions in high school football. So our mechanic in the last part of the first half, second half, is we're going to go sideline to sideline as the umpire. We're going to have to work hard. The clock is stopped, so we're not in as big of a hurry, but we're going to go out and get the football. We don't want to pass it around. Let's get it from the official or the player directly if possible. Less critical with the clock stop, but if we ever have, let's say they were short of the line to gain, then umpires, we need to get that ball, get it into the inbound spot, and get back to our spot as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And the best way to do that is to pick up the line of scrimmage official on the other side of the field, who's using cross-field mechanics, so you can pick them up instead of having to turn around and look at the covering official to get the spot, which is what we do here. Let's look across the other side of the field at that line of scrimmage official, put the ball down, get back to our spot, and then referees, you can wind it up. So that's what we want to do mechanically in hurry up type situations at the end of the half or at the end of the game. And then the other piece I just want to point out and call your attention to on this play is the new exception relative to legal forward passes, and that's Rule 752 exception. It's legal for a player positioned directly behind the snapper to conserve time by intentionally throwing the ball forward to the ground immediately after receiving the snap that has neither been muffed nor touched the ground. So in this case, he receives the snap, doesn't muff it, doesn't hit the ground, he throws it to the ground. That is a legal way to kill the clock in high school football now. It used to be it had to be under center. That's no longer the case. You now have this exception. So keep that in mind. As long as the snap is not muffed or the ball does not touch the ground, if that takes place, then they are allowed to legally ground it from that shotgun type position. So have a discussion with your crew, mechanics, end of game or end of half, end of game, hurry up type situations, how we can get the ball into the spot most efficiently without dropping the ball, without taking up precious time for the offense to have an opportunity to run a play. So let's discuss mechanics there, and then remember the exception on grounding the ball. On this one, we're going to have hands to the face by defensive player number 29. And you'll see it on the replay, and we'll show it in slow motion, but I just want to talk about the rule a little bit and then just our mechanics and how we see this kind of action. So if you see here on the replay here, right at the 40 or 38 yard line or so, 29's just puts his hand right underneath the mask and pins it all the way back. And this is definitely a foul for illegal personal contact that we would want called. And it gets challenging. It's right in the middle of a pile. But I think it gets back to what we talked about on several other tapes, that with 5 officials, we want to make sure that we play the percentages and get our eyes on blocks and at the point of attack. And if as line of scrimmage officials, if we have our vision on blocks, back judges as well, and even umpire potentially on this play, if we get our eyes to blocks at the point of attack, I think we pick this one up. And it's pretty prolonged. Incites roughness. You see that 35 is really not happy about the blocking action that's done on him, and that's where we look at Rule 943 and says that if a player makes any contact with an opponent, including a defenseless player, which is deemed unnecessary, excessive, or incites roughness, should be a foul for illegal personal contact, and it should be a 15-yard penalty in this case. So it's against the defense, so remember that our enforcement would be from the end of the run in this case if we were to pick this up. But I really just want to focus on mechanics. Let's get our vision to point of attack blocks in line of scrimmage, we don't want to ball watch unless we really need to. Let's get our vision to blocks. Back judges, you need to be active run blocking officials, especially with the umpire in the offensive backfield. And I think if we would have had a set of eyes at the point of attack, I think we could have picked up this particular action. So just talk through our mechanics and our coverages to make sure that we have eyes at the point of attack. So we pick this up, and then remember that prolonged hands to the face is an illegal personal contact foul. On this one, we're going to have a free kick, and just as crews, just make sure we have a discussion about our free kick mechanics. We've talked about these plays a number of times in training tapes and on memos, but in this particular case, we have a free kick out of bounds at roughly the 25-yard line, and we kill the clock and indicate that we have a free kick out of bounds. Referees, that means we need information from the offended team's coach on what option they want to pick. Make sure when we're doing the announcement, let's come to a complete stop and give the announcement, and then we can move on to our next play responsibilities. Ultimately, this team chooses to take the ball 25 yards beyond the previous spot. Remember also, they don't have a choice. The ball has to be put in bounds at the inbound spot if they ultimately take one of these options. And the options are under Rule 619. A free kick shall not be kicked out of bounds between the goal lines untouched in bounds by R. If it is kicked out of bounds and R does not accept a penalty for kick-catch interference on the same kick, R has the following choices. So we don't have kick-catch interference on this play. So first choice, 5-yard penalty from the previous spot and have K re-kick. That's always an option. B, accept a 5-yard penalty from the succeeding spot, meaning in this case, the ball went out of bounds at the 25, so 5 yards from there would be the 30. And that applies anywhere on the field. So if we kick an onside kick and it goes out of bounds, it's going to be 5 yards from that spot, assuming the kick was not touched by R. The next provision, put the ball in play at the inbound spot 25 yards beyond the previous spot. So if we're kicking off from the 40, the ball would be placed at the 35-yard line on the inbound spot on the side of the field that went out of bounds. And you see that the crew originally puts the ball in the middle of the field, but then figures out that the mistake they were making was allowing them that choice, and they can't do that. They have to take it at the inbound spot. So they properly move it to the inbound spot in this case. But let's say we don't kick off from the 40. Remember that it's not, the rule doesn't say place it at the 35. The rule is 25 yards beyond the previous spot. So if we have a safety kick from the 20 and it goes out of bounds, that means they could potentially place it at the 45-yard line of K in that case. Same thing if we have a penalty and we're kicking from the 50 or R's 45. Now it's 25 yards beyond the previous spot, and half the distance does not apply to that particular provision. And then finally, they can always decline the penalty and put the ball in play at the inbound spot, which I don't know why any team would take that choice, but that is their choice. So keep these options in mind. I think we do a pretty good job of the 25 yards provision. Just reminder on what to do if it's 25 yards from a free kick line that's not the 40. And then the one piece I just want to remind officials of and coaches of our option to take it 5 yards from the succeeding spot. And so if it's kicked out of bounds in advance of the 35-yard or the 40-yard line rather, or 35-yard line, they obviously would want another 5 yards. So don't forget that as an option. And then finally, remember it has to be put in play at the inbound spot. Okay, another free kick here, and I want to talk about some rules and philosophy here. So you see, we have a free kick really close to the goal line, and this is properly shut down and ruled as a touchback by the officials. So this is really well done by a philosophy and rule standpoint. So first, let's take a look at the rule. So we're looking at Rule 853. It is a touchback when any free kick, which is not a scoring attempt, or a grounded three-point field goal attempt breaks the plane of R's goal line, it would be a touchback in that case, unless R chooses a spot of first touching by K, which we don't have in this case. We're going to have just a kick that crosses the goal line or breaks the plane of the goal line. Therefore, we have a touchback. The other aspect to keep in mind is Rule 851. Responsibility for forcing the ball from the field of play across a goal line is attributed to the player who carries, snaps, passes, fumbles, or kicks the ball unless a new force is applied to a grounded backwards pass, kick, or fumble. And note that muffing of a kick is not considered a new force. So if this receiver were to muff this ball and it would subsequently roll across the goal line, that is still a touchback because it is not a new force. It's still a kick. And then if we go back to Rule 853, if a kick crosses the plane of the goal line, breaks that plane, we're going to have a touchback. So by rule, this is a touchback. This is not like other rules codes where they can take a knee or they have to cover a muffed kick. Assuming that it is still a kick and it breaks the plane of the goal line, it is a touchback. And then philosophy speaking, referees, line judges, linesmen, let's not have the best eyes in history of football. If it's 1 inch, 1 centimeter from the goal line, make it a touchback. If it's that close, make it a touchback. Don't forget to ask the receiving team where they want to put the ball and play at the 20-yard line. But let's not split hairs on this. If it's that close, make it a touchback, and that's exactly what the crew does here. So we handle this really well from a rule standpoint and a philosophy standpoint. Well done. On this last play, I want to talk about our mechanics and then just pregame communication. So you see here, the play clock is running down, 4th and 4, critical play, and we're going to have delay of game that is called by the back judge. And if you see here at the end of the play, or at the end of this clip here, you'll see that the coach is pretty adamant that he was trying to communicate with the line of scrimmage official, or with any official for that matter, that he wanted a timeout. And so let's talk about pregame communication with the coaches relative to a situation like this one. We're going to tell the coaches, look, if you want a timeout, you can come all the way. If we're down inside the 10, inside the 15, inside the 5, if you want to come all the way down to us and say, I want a timeout, no problem. We're not going to flag you for unsportsmanlike conduct. You come on down, and we will give you a timeout. Now, coaches have to they have to understand, they have to be told that if you do come down there inside the 15 for the purpose of requesting a timeout, you're going to get one. You can't just come down to the 5-yard line as a coach and say, oh, I was just coming down to take a look at the formation or something along those lines. That's not going to work. So let them know, in exchange for us letting you come all the way down there, we're going to not penalize you. However, you are going to be charged with a timeout. If they don't have a timeout left, then they're going to be charged with a sideline warning at a minimum for being out of the coaching box or out of the team box area. And if they've already been warned, then we have to move on for 5 and 15-yard penalties for those sideline warning pieces. But this is a situation where, in addition to that communication with the coach before the game about being able to come down and request a timeout, we just need to have football IQ here. We need to understand that it's getting down to the end of the play clock, especially with a visible play clock like we have in this situation. we just need to have football IQ and understand that in a situation like this, it's pretty likely that the coach might ask for a timeout. And so, back judges, we probably need to keep an eye on the coaches in the periphery. Give them a timeout if they can avoid a delay game foul. And then if we tell the coaches before the game that they can come all the way down and ask for a timeout, I think we would have avoided some heartache on a situation like this one. But it's ultimately comes down to having football IQ and understanding that it's pretty likely that a coach might want a timeout in a situation like this. So let's be looking for them. Let's not try to nitpick them on delay a game. Remember, delay a game fouls. Here's our mechanic. We're back judges. We're looking at the clock. It hits 0. Once it hits 0, we're looking to the ball. If the ball is moving, no foul. If it's not moving, delay a game foul. That's with visible play clocks. If we don't have visible play clocks, we're not going to be as fine. We're going to make sure that they're quality fouls on delay a game. But ultimately, it's about our mechanics and having football IQ. Make sure you communicate with coaches about what they can do to request a timeout. And then in situations where we think there might be one, we need to be ready for that and then recognize that for the coaches. Okay, that will do it for training tape number 6. A little longer tape this week. Several rules related pieces, mechanics, crew communication, working with coaches, football IQ, a lot of things to mix into our pregame and things that we consider on Friday nights. We're getting towards the second half of the season here. Games, mean a lot to these teams and programs, and let's really bear down relative to our rules knowledge and our mechanics and positioning. I would say, by and large, we're doing a really nice job. Just a couple things to clean up, and let's slow down. Use really slow and deliberate mechanics to make sure that we're enforcing penalties correctly. We're communicating information effectively with the referee and with coaches. The more we can slow down and be deliberate on these things, I think the less mistakes we're going to make, and we're going to be in a lot better shape as we move forward towards the end of the season. So with that, have great games this weekend. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll talk to you next week.